I watched from behind my living room curtain as my daughter's car rolled into the driveway, the trunk crammed full and boxers piled in the back seat. And I knew immediately she wasn't here to visit, but to move into a house I no longer owned. My name is Patricia, though most people call me Patty. I'm 72 years old. And as I sit now in my new apartment 3 states away, I'm about to tell you how my own daughter tried to steal everything from me and how I made sure she got exactly what she deserved. So before we go any further, let me ask where you're watching from and invite you to drop your state or country in the comments. Because this story will take you on a journey, and I want to know who's riding along with me. It all began 6 months ago on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Melissa showed up at my door unannounced, which wasn't unusual at all. But the folder tucked under her arm, and the way her husband Brandon stayed in the car instead of coming in to say hello, certainly were. And as I looked at her standing there, I was reminded that my daughter had always been ambitious, even as a little girl wanting the biggest piece of cake, the lead role in the school play, the most expensive prom dress. And while I'd raised her to reach for the stars, somewhere along the way she'd started reaching into other people's pockets. "Mom, we need to talk about your future," she said as she sat down on my sofa without asking. The same sofa where I'd rocked her to sleep as a baby, and in the same living room where we'd celebrated every Christmas for 43 years since my late husband and I bought the house in 1982. And I told her my future seemed pretty set as I poured her the chamomile tea she used to love, explaining that I was healthy, happy, and right where I wanted to be. But she didn't touch the tea, and instead opened the folder, spreading papers across my coffee table like she was dealing cards, business plans, loan applications, property assessments, before saying I was too old-fashioned to understand what she was trying to build, and explaining, without even looking at me, that she and Brandon had an opportunity to start a boutique consulting firm but needed real capital, not a small business loan with impossible terms. As I scanned the papers, my eyes landed on my address at the bottom of one page along with my home's estimated value of $875,000, a staggering number born from decades of rising prices in a neighborhood that had grown expensive and from a house that had cost us $89,000 in 1982 and was now worth a small fortune simply because I'd maintained it with love and care for more than 40 years. And when I asked what exactly she was suggesting, though my stomach already knew, she told me plainly to sell the house, saying I didn't need all that space and pointing out wonderful senior living communities where I'd be around people my own age, with activities and no maintenance to worry about. Finally looking at me with a smile so sweet it could have fooled anyone who didn't know her, as she added that I could live comfortably on part of the sale while the rest would help my daughter secure her future, asking pointedly if that wasn't what mothers did. That was the moment I should have shown her the door. But instead I told her I'd think about it, wanting to see just how far she'd go, and I watched her face light up as if I'd already agreed, while she exclaimed how wonderful it was and how she knew I'd understand once I heard her out, quickly gathering her papers as though afraid I might change my mind and telling me she'd give me a week to process everything before meeting with a real estate agent the following Friday, someone she already had in mind who was excellent at getting top dollar for properties like mine, which only confirmed that this wasn't spontaneous at all but a carefully constructed plan waiting for my approval. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen for an hour staring at the periwinkle blue walls my husband Robert had painted because he knew how much I loved the color, missing him as I did every day since he'd been gone for 8 years and feeling, in that moment, oddly grateful he wasn't here to see what our daughter had become. Over the next few days, Melissa called constantly under the guise of checking in, asking if I'd thought more about our conversation, and sending links to senior living facilities that grew more depressing by the minute with their shared rooms, scheduled meal times, and activities like bingo and chair yoga, as if turning 70 meant turning off your brain. And I kept reminding myself that I was 72, not dead, that I still drove, gardened, volunteered at the library every Wednesday, and had friends, hobbies, and a full life, even though to Melissa I had become nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle standing between her and nearly $1 million. Then on Thursday she returned, this time with Brandon, who had always been quiet and content to let his wife do the talking. But that afternoon he walked through my house like he was appraising merchandise, commenting on the hardwood floors, the updated kitchen, and the large backyard while calling it prime real estate to Melissa rather than to me, and suggesting they could probably get more than the estimate if they timed it right with the spring market. Talking about my home and my life as if I weren't standing right there. Until Melissa handed me glossy brochures for places called Sunset Gardens and Golden Years Manor. Names designed to make aging sound peaceful instead of what it really was living. I took the brochures and smiled, playing the part of the confused old woman who needed her daughter's guidance, all the while paying close attention, taking mental notes, watching them watch me. And that night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the conversation over and over, hearing Melissa's words echo, "Your future," as if she alone got to decide it. And around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got out of bed and did something I'm not proud of. Something that would change everything. Melissa had left her phone on my counter earlier while she used the bathroom, and when she returned, she'd been in a rush to leave, leaving it behind. And what I hadn't mentioned was that I'd seen her passcode months ago when she showed me vacation photos for simple numbers, 815, her birthday, and I knew her email password too, from the one time she'd asked me to print something from her account and I'd watched her type it in, and I shouldn't have logged into her email. I know privacy matters, even between mothers and daughters, but something in my gut told me that if I didn't look, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So it took me 20 minutes to figure out how to access her email from my laptop. Not that I'm completely technology illiterate, but I'm not fluent either. And finally, I got in. The first few emails were ordinary work correspondence, shopping confirmations, but then I searched for my name, and my heart dropped into my stomach when I read, "Mom agreed." Written in an email Melissa had sent to Brandon just hours after our first conversation. Essentially a yes, with instructions to give me a week to feel like it was my idea before moving forward. And I kept reading, finding another email to someone named Richard Chen, a real estate attorney, saying the sale would need to proceed quickly once I signed because I tended to overthink things. And could they structure it so the papers were final once I initiated? My hands shaking so badly I almost closed the laptop, but I didn't. 3 emails down, I found one that made my blood run colder, forward from Brandon to Melissa, sent 2 weeks before she'd even approached me. The subject line reading, "Oldwood Senior Care Facility, Shared Room Availability, Opening to Reveal. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, thank you for your inquiry about long-term care for your mother. We currently have availability in our shared accommodation wing. The monthly rate is $3,200, which covers room, board, and basic care services. Based on your description of her health status and financial situation, this would be our recommended option. More private arrangements start at $6,800 per month. But, as you mentioned, budget is a concern." And budget was indeed a concern. They were planning to sell my $875,000 house and stick me in the cheapest nursing home they could find, pocketing the difference. And it got worse when I found a text thread Melissa had forwarded to her own email from 3 days ago with Brandon asking, "What if she doesn't want to sell?" And Melissa replying, "Then we move to plan B. I've been researching. We could potentially get power of attorney if we can prove she's not mentally competent. She forgot my birthday last year and has mentioned mixing up her medications before." Brandon asked if that was enough, and Melissa replied, "It's a start. Worst case, we wait her out. She's 72. How much longer can she really hold on to that house anyway?" I read that message 17 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. But each time the words stayed the same, and it became clear my daughter wasn't just trying to take my house. She was planning to take my independence, my dignity, my entire life. And she was willing to paint me as mentally incompetent to do it. So I closed the laptop, and I didn't cry. I got angry. And the next morning, I called my own lawyer, not the family attorney who handled Robert's will, the one Melissa knew but someone knew, a woman named Susan Bartlett who specialized in estate planning and elder law, telling her I needed to make some changes to my will quietly. And we met that afternoon in her modest, downtown office. Susan may be 50 with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and I showed her the printed emails, watching her face tighten as she read them. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm very sorry you're going through this," she said, sliding the papers back across her desk. "Unfortunately, it's not as uncommon as you'd think. Financial exploitation of elderly parents is a growing problem." "I'm not elderly," I said sharply. "I'm 72 and perfectly capable." "I can see that," she smiled. "So, let's make sure your daughter sees it too. What exactly did you have in mind?" I told her my plan, and as I spoke, her smile grew wider, and over the next 2 weeks, I played the perfect part, sounding uncertain and confused when Melissa called, asking the same questions multiple times. Now, which facility did you say had the garden? I'd ask, even though she'd told me 3 times, carefully coaxing her into overconfidence while I silently prepared my next move. I met with her real estate agent friend, a sharply dressed woman named Amanda who talked too fast and smiled too much, and I asked simple questions about the selling process, nodding along as she rattled off market values and closing costs. Your daughter mentioned you're looking to downsize, Amanda said, her tone dripping with condescension. That's so smart. Houses like this require so much upkeep. And at my age, I still know how to use a lawnmower, I interrupted. But yes, Melissa thinks it's time, letting them think they were winning. While behind the scenes I was busy, I met with Susan twice more, contacted the charity that had meant the most to Robert and me, the Riverside Women's Shelter where we'd volunteered together for 15 years, made phone calls, signed papers, opened new accounts, and started packing. Not everything, just the things that mattered. Robert's wedding ring, our photo albums, my mother's china, the quilt my grandmother had made, which I boxed carefully and moved to a storage unit across town, paying for a year in advance with cash. Melissa noticed nothing, too busy planning her business launch, sending me links to office spaces she and Brandon were considering. Once the house sells, we'll be able to afford the perfect location, she told me during one visit, eyes gleaming, right downtown, glass walls, modern furniture, nothing old-fashioned. That word again, old-fashioned, like it was an insult. Like the values I'd tried to teach, her honesty, integrity, respect were outdated concepts that didn't matter anymore. That sounds lovely, dear, I said, pouring her tea she wouldn't drink. I knew you'd come around, Mom, she added, patting my hand like I was a child. You're doing the right thing. Dad would be proud of you for helping family, and Robert would have been horrified. But I didn't say that. Ty just smiled and counted down the days. The signing was scheduled for a Friday. Amanda had drawn up the listing papers, and Melissa had arranged everything so efficiently it made my skin crawl. And we were meeting at the real estate office at 10 in the morning. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing the same floral dress I'd worn to Robert's funeral. Melissa probably thought I was being sentimental, but really, I was reminding myself what was at stake, honoring the life Robert and I had built, the home we'd made, the future we'd planned. Melissa came in exactly on time, Brandon trailing behind her like always, Amanda already there, papers spread across the conference table, sticky tabs marking everywhere I needed to sign. Mom, you look nice, Melissa said, kissing my cheek, the affection feeling like sandpaper. Are you ready for this new chapter? I've been thinking a lot about new chapters, I said, about endings and beginnings. That's the spirit, Amanda jumped in, sliding the first document toward me. Now, if you'll just initial here, and sign at the bottom. I picked up the pen, held it over the paper, watched Melissa lean forward, barely breathing, then set the pen down. Actually, I can't sign this, I said calmly. The room went silent. Melissa's smile froze. What do you mean you can't sign it? Mom, we've been over this 100 times. You agreed. I said I'd think about it. I did, and I've made my decision. I stood up, straightening my dress. I'm not selling my house. Not to fund your business. Not now. Not ever. Melissa's face went red. Are you serious right now? After everything we've planned? After I've already put deposits down on office space? That sounds like poor financial planning on your part. Brandon finally spoke up. Mrs. Peterson, be reasonable. You don't need that big house. You're alone there. Melissa's just trying to help you. Help me into a $3,200 a month shared room at Oakwood while you pocket the rest. I asked quietly, and the color drained from both their faces. How did you, Melissa, start it? How did I know about your plans, about the emails, the texts discussing my supposed mental incompetence? I picked up my purse. I'm 72, Melissa, not stupid, and definitely not old-fashioned enough to let my own daughter rob me blind. Mom, you went through my emails. That's a violation of my privacy, she said. The audacity almost made me laugh. And you were planning to declare me mentally unfit to steal my home. I think we're even. Amanda cleared her throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should reschedule when everyone's had time to cool down. There won't be a rescheduling, I said. Miss Chen, I appreciate your time, but your services won't be needed. I walked toward the door. Melissa grabbed my arm. You're making a huge mistake when you're alone in that house, unable to take care of yourself. Don't come crying to me. I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. Melissa, I'd rather die alone in my home than live one day under your care. I left them standing there and didn't look back, but I wasn't done, not even close. The real work began that weekend. On Saturday morning, I met with Susan again, this time at her office with a notary present. Are you absolutely certain about this? Susan asked me one final time. Once these papers are signed, there's no undoing it. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I told her. And I signed the deed transfer my house. All $875,000 worth of it no longer belonged to me. It now belonged to the Riverside Women's Shelter, the charity Robert and I had supported for years, the same shelter that had helped dozens of women escape abuse, find jobs, rebuild their lives, was now the beneficiary of the house Robert and I had loved for over 40 years. The agreement was simple. I could live in the house for as long as I wanted, and when I either moved out or passed away, the property would be sold and the proceeds would go to the shelter. Not a penny would go to Melissa. Your daughter could potentially contest this, Susan had warned. Let her try, I said. I signed my updated will next, the one leaving Melissa exactly $1 and a letter explaining why. With everything else, my savings, my retirement accounts, my personal belongings split between 3 charities and 2 cousins who'd actually stayed in touch over the years. Then came the part that made me feel both guilty and gleeful. I was moving. I'd found a beautiful apartment in Portland, Oregon, 3 states away, thanks to a friend from my library volunteer group who'd moved there 2 years ago and had been begging me to visit. She helped me find a sunny 2-bedroom with a balcony overlooking the river, in a building full of active seniors who organized book clubs and hiking trips. When do you want to list your house? The shelter's property manager asked. Not yet, I said. I need about 2 weeks to finish moving. After that, you can do whatever you like with it. Those 2 weeks were a blur. I hired movers, paid in cash, people Melissa didn't know, who came on a Tuesday while she was at work, packing up 43 years of memories in 8 hours. I kept my cell phone off for radio silence. My neighbor Frank watched from his porch. Everything okay, Patty? Everything's perfect, Frank. I'm going on an adventure. What should I tell that daughter of yours when she comes looking? Tell her the truth, I said. Tell her I'm gone. I left on a Thursday morning in my old Honda Civic with my cat Whiskers meowing in his carrier on the passenger seat. I didn't leave a note or say goodbye, only the house keys on the kitchen counter with a copy of the deed transfer and a simple note. The house is no longer mine to sell. Good luck with your business. I drove for 3 days, stopping at motels, eating at diners, feeling lighter with every mile between me and that life. I didn't tell Melissa where I was, but I knew she'd find out eventually. Exactly 3 weeks later, she tracked down my new number. I don't know how, probably called every relative until someone gave in. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was having tea on my balcony, watching the sun set over the river. My phone rang. Her name appeared. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Mom. She was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What the hell did you do? Where are you? Why is there a charity sign on our house? Not your house, Melissa. It was never your house. You donated it. Donated it. Are you insane? That's my inheritance. That's my future. Your inheritance is $1. Check your mail. My new will should arrive any day now. Silence. So complete I thought she'd hung up. Then, you can't do this. I'll contest it. I'll get a lawyer. I already have a lawyer, a very good one, and I'm completely mentally competent, in case you were wondering, sharp as an attack, according to my doctor. I had him documented just in case you tried pulling that incompetency stunt you and Brandon discussed. I heard her breathing, heavy and angry. This is because I asked you to sell, to help start a business. What kind of mother punishes her daughter for asking for help? The kind whose daughter tried to have her declared incompetent and stuffed in a cheap nursing home, I said calmly. I read the emails, Melissa, the texts, all of it. You had no right, and you had no right to plan out my entire future without my consent. Another long silence. Mom, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe I pushed too hard. Why don't I come visit wherever you are? We can talk this through. I'm sure we can work something out. And there it was. She still thought she could manipulate me. Still thought if she showed up in person, turned on the tears, played the devoted daughter, I'd crack. I'm not telling you where I am, I said. Come on, Mom. I'm your daughter, your only child. You can't just cut me off completely. Fine, fine, she snapped, rage back in her voice. Stay hidden in whatever hole you've crawled into, but you're going to get old. Mom, you're going to get sick. And when you do, when you're lying in a hospital bed with no one to visit, no one to take care of you, you're going to regret this. You're going to die alone. I took a sip of my tea, watched a boat drift down the river. Melissa, I'd rather die alone and free than live one day as your prisoner. Goodbye. I hung up. She called back 17 times that night. I blocked her number. 2 days later, my cousin Jennifer called. Melissa's asking everyone where you are. She sounds desperate. Let her be desperate, I said. Don't tell her anything. I won't, but Patty, she's your daughter. I know. That was the hardest part. Life in Portland was peaceful. Almost too peaceful at first. I'd spent decades being a mother, a wife, a caretaker, and barely remembered how to just be Patty. But I joined the book club in my building, made friends with a woman named Dorothy who taught watercolor classes, and started volunteering at the local animal shelter on Wednesdays. It turned out I liked cats even more than I'd thought, and Whiskers certainly approved, because my apartment overlooked the river, and every morning I had coffee on the balcony watching joggers and cyclists pass below, with no yard to maintain, no gutters to clean, no memories haunting every corner, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about Melissa, because every time my phone rang with an unknown number, my heart jumped. Part of me hoping she'd actually apologize, not just try to manipulate me back into her plans, but the calls were never from her, since she'd given up trying to reach me directly and instead went through others, with Jennifer calling once a month with updates I never asked for. Melissa's business didn't work out. She told me in July, they couldn't get the funding without your house money, and I replied, that's unfortunate, feeling nothing. In September, she and Brandon are having problems. I think the stress got to them, and I said neutrally, marriage is hard. In October, she asked about you, wanted to know if you were okay, and I answered, I'm fine. Please stop giving her updates about me, not trying to be cruel but needing space, distance, a life that was mine alone. While the shelter sent updates about the house, explaining they'd decided not to sell it immediately and were using it as transitional housing for women, leaving abusive situations, up to 3 families at a time, rent-free while they got back on their feet, something Robert would have loved and I certainly did. And when the shelter director told me on the phone, you've changed lives, we've already helped 4 families because of your generosity, it meant more than Melissa's business ever could have. By November, I'd settled into a routine Monday mornings at the farmer's market, Wednesdays at the animal shelter, Friday nights potluck dinners in our building, weekends for whatever struck my fancy, hiking, painting, reading, or sitting on my balcony with Whiskers purring in my lap hand. I was happy, genuinely and surprisingly happy, until a cold Tuesday in early December, when Jennifer called with an edge in her voice and said, Patty, I think you should know, Melissa found out where you are, making my stomach drop as I asked how, and she said she didn't know. Maybe Melissa hired someone, or saw something on social media, asking if I'd posted any photos, and I remembered Dorothy taking a picture of our book club the week before and posting it with tags, the location visible and the building name in the background. Damn it, I whispered, as Jennifer told me Melissa was talking about driving out, saying I needed to face reality and that she deserved to see me, maybe soon, apologizing. And I said it wasn't her fault and thanked her for the warning. Then, after hanging up, I sat very still thinking before I started to smile, because if Melissa wanted to see me, she could, and I'd be ready. She arrived on a Saturday morning exactly 1 week later, and I was ready, having spent the week preparing, not hiding or running, but preparing by inviting 2 witnesses. My lawyer, Susan, who flew in from home, and Dorothy, from my building, who was sharp as a tack and volunteered to help. And I'd also done one more thing Melissa would never expect, so when the buzzer rang while I sat in my living room, Dorothy answered and Melissa's tight, controlled voice came through saying she was there to see Patricia Peterson, her daughter. And Dorothy told her to come up to the 4th floor, apartment for C. And I heard footsteps and knocking before Dorothy opened the door to reveal Melissa with 2 large boxes and a rolling suitcase, her face thinner with new lines around her mouth, looking older and tired, her expression flickering between anger and something like relief when she saw me in my armchair as she said, Mom, and I answered, Melissa, while she noticed Dorothy by the kitchen and Susan on the couch with a notepad and snapped, Who are these people? Are you seriously having witnesses for this? To which I calmly replied, Come in, or don't. But if you're staying, put your boxers down. You're blocking the doorway. And she dragged everything inside, breathing hard, saying she'd driven 14 hours and I couldn't even give her my address, that she'd had to track me down like a criminal. And I corrected. You track me down like I'm prey. There's a difference. As she told me not to be dramatic and looked around my apartment with her nose wrinkling, calling it small, while I said, it's perfect, and she turned to face me saying I'd made my point, that I was mad about the house thing but it had gone on long enough and now she was here so we could fix this. And when I asked, fix what exactly, she said, fix us, fix this family, gesturing wildly and insisting I couldn't abandon my only daughter over one disagreement. And when I repeated, one disagreement, I stood up slowly and told her she'd tried to steal my house, planned to declare me incompetent, put me in a cheap nursing home, and take everything I'd worked for my entire life, prompting her to start denying it before stopping when she realized witnesses were present, and instead, saying maybe she'd gotten carried away with planning, but it was never malicious, that she just needed help, and that I had so much, and I have so little. You have so little because you spend everything you earn, I said. That's not my emergency to fix. And she changed tactics, her eyes welling with tears as she said, fine, you're right, I messed up, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm still your daughter. I'm still family, and families forgive each other. And if you're watching this and you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel because what happened next, you're not going to believe. As I looked at my daughter standing in my living room with her boxers and her suitcase and her plans, and I said the words I'd been practicing for weeks. You're right, you are my daughter, which is why I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. And Melissa's face lit up. She actually smiled and said, thank you, Mom, thank you. I knew you'd come around. I knew deep down you'd $1. I interrupted, and the smile froze as she said, what? And I continued, you'll inherit $1 from me. It's already in my will, signed and notarized. Susan here has copies, gesturing to my lawyer who nodded confirmation, and Melissa said, you can't be serious. And I replied, completely serious. The rest goes to charities and 2 cousins who actually call me on my birthday. Then I paused and added, the house you wanted so badly, it's providing free housing to abuse survivors, for families so far, real people with real problems, not fake emergencies manufactured to guilt your mother. And I went on, you drove 14 hours in a car. I didn't ask you to drive to an apartment. I didn't invite you to carrying boxes I assume are full of your things, which means you plan to move in here without asking. Am I wrong? And she didn't answer, the silence being answer enough, so I said firmly, those boxers go back in your car. You're not staying here, you're not welcome here. And before you threaten me with abandonment or loneliness or whatever manipulation you've prepared, let me save you the trouble. I have friends, I have a community, I have a life I built without you, and it's better than anything I had before. And she said, I'm your daughter, her voice cracking, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her, almost, before I said quietly, then act like it. Daughters don't steal from their mothers, they don't scheme and plot and lie. You want forgiveness, you want a relationship, then you need to actually earn it, not with tears, not with guilt trips, with genuine change. And Susan stood up holding out a document, saying, Mrs. Peterson, this is unnecessary, but I said, she should see it. And Susan handed Melissa the paper, a restraining order application filled out but not yet filed. As I told her, if you contact me again without my explicit permission, this gets filed. If you show up at my home again uninvited, it gets filed. If you harass my friends or my family for information about me, it gets filed. And Melissa stared at the paper with shaking hands and said, you'd really do this to your own daughter? To which I replied, you'd really have tried to declare your own mother incompetent for money. So yes, I really would. And she grabbed her boxers with jerky, angry movements, tears streaming down her face that I couldn't tell were genuine or performance. Maybe she couldn't either anymore. And at the door she turned back one last time and said, you'll regret this. And I answered, the only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. And she left. The door closed. Her footsteps faded down the hallway. Dorothy came and sat beside me, putting a gentle hand on my shoulder. Susan started packing up her papers. Whiskers jumped into my lap purring. And when Dorothy asked softly, are you okay? I took a deep breath, looked around my small, perfect apartment with my friends and my cat and my freedom, and said, yeah, I really am. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I meant it.